I have written a management letter to myself. If you've never had one, a management letter is what an auditor sends the board after the audit. Not the accounts. The accounts are the public thing. The management letter is the private one, and it says, in the driest language available to the English professions, here are the weaknesses in your internal control environment, and here is what they will cost you if you don't fix them. I wrote them for other people for 40 years. 6 pages, usually. Numbered findings, each with an observation, an implication, and a recommendation, and I was known, Fiona at the bank used to laugh about it, for a certain lack of mercy in the drafting. Mine runs to 11 pages. There are 9 findings. The first one is dated the 4th of November 2022, and it reads, Client provided unrestricted, unmarked copies of primary identification documents to a third party without recording the purpose, the recipient, or the date, and retained no register of the disclosure. Implication: total loss of control over identity. Recommendation: not applicable. Finding is historic and consequences are irreversible. I've read that line perhaps 200 times, and I still find it funny in a way that concerns the people around me. Let me deal with the obvious thing first, because it's the thing everyone wants to say, and I'd rather say it myself. I am a chartered accountant. I qualified in 1985. I ran a 5-partner practice in Harrogate for 22 years, doing audit, tax, and forensic work. And forensic means I was, professionally, a man who found frauds. I gave evidence in court 11 times. I once unpicked a purchase ledger fraud at a Leeds engineering firm that had run for 6 years, and I did it in 9 days from a set of bank statements and a supplier list. And what was done to me was elementary. Not clever, not sophisticated. There is no technique in it that would trouble a competent second-year trainee, and if you handed me the file cold with the names removed, I would have identified the whole structure over one afternoon and a pot of tea. I have spent 19 months trying to work out how that is possible, and this is the report. The relevant history is short, and I'll keep it short, because the psychology matters more than the biography. Married in 1988 to Susan. Widowed in 2017. Pancreatic. 11 weeks from diagnosis. And I'm not going to elaborate. No children, which was a decision in our 30s that neither of us examined properly, and which I have examined a great deal since. Sold my equity in the practice in 2021 at 60. The share came to $162,000 after tax, and with the pension pot and the house and panel, sold in 2022, I had a smidge over $265,000 liquid, plus an index-linked income of about $23,000. I moved to Bangkok in February 2022. Ari district, if you know it. The leafy one, north of the center, full of coffee places and Thai families, and a certain sort of foreigner who tells you he doesn't like Sukhumvit. Why Bangkok? Honestly, because I had been to a conference there in 2004 and had remembered it for 18 years as the only week of my professional life in which I had been entirely happy, and because at 61, in a house in Panal, with Susan's coat still in the hall, I could not think of a better reason to be anywhere. Now, the control environment. I want to describe how I ran my money, because the entire finding turns on it, and because it will surprise people. I was, by any reasonable standard, exemplary. I reconciled every account monthly. Every one. I ran a personal cash book in a spreadsheet with a structure I'd designed in 1994 and refined about 40 times. I had a documented investment policy for my own portfolio. I checked my UK current account, my 2 savings accounts, my ISA, and my SIP against statements on the first working day of every month, and I had done so, without missing a month, since February 1991. I could tell you, and can still tell you, what my electricity bill was in September 2009. That is not a man who is careless with money. That is a man with a mild and well-managed obsessive streak that made him rather good at his job. And here is finding number 2, which I did not understand for 19 months, and which is the single most useful thing in this entire account. Client's reconciliation procedures covered only accounts and liabilities known to the client. No procedure existed for identifying accounts or liabilities of which the client was unaware. Read that again. I reconciled the ledger I had, every month, immaculately, for 31 years. And fraud does not live in the ledger you have. It lives in the ledger you don't have, and no amount of diligence applied to the first one will ever touch the second. I could have reconciled my known accounts twice a month for the rest of my life, and it would have made not one particle of difference. I audited companies for 40 years. The first thing you do, the absolute first thing, before you touch a single figure, is a completeness test. Have we got all of it? Are there accounts, obligations, entities that aren't on this list? It's day one, week one, the most basic procedure in the discipline. I never once performed it on myself. In 64 years, it never crossed my mind that it was a thing a person could do. Now to the second structural weakness, which is the personal one, and which is harder to write about. I compartmentalized. I had a rule. It was not written down, but it was as firm as anything in my professional life. And it was this: I do not apply accountancy to my private relationships. It's vulgar. It's cold. It's the thing that makes accountants a punchline. The man who itemizes the restaurant bill, who wants a receipt from his own wife. Susan and I had a joint account for 30 years, and I never once queried a line on it. Not once. That was deliberate, and I was quietly proud of it. And I want to be very clear that with Susan, it was correct, and cost me nothing, and I would not change it. But it hardened into something else. It became a wall, and on one side of the wall was a man who could detect a 6-year purchase ledger fraud from a supplier list, and on the other side was a man who had made a conscious lifetime decision never to look. The fraud walked through the middle of that wall without touching either side. I met Gift on the 11th of May, 2022, and I met her at a bank. That is the detail that people find either sinister or hilarious, and I've stopped being able to tell which. I went into a branch off Phahanyothan Road to open a Thai bot account. The standard business, passport, certificate of residence from immigration, the whole morning gone, and I was handed to a customer advisor who spoke better English than the queue system had led me to expect. She was 29. She had a degree in business administration from a university in the Northeast, and she'd been with that bank for 6 years, 3 of them in that branch. She was not a teller. She was the person who sits at a desk and opens accounts, explains products, handles documentation, verifies identity. That was her actual job, professionally, for 6 years. It took her 50 minutes to open my account, and about 9 months for me to work out that I'd been happier in that 50 minutes than at any point since 2017. I went back. I had a query about the internet banking, then a genuine question about a fixed deposit. Then, in June, a query so thin that I am embarrassed to describe it, and she said something to me across the desk about the coffee place on the corner, and that was that. I need to describe the relationship accurately, because the account I'd give in a witness statement and the account I'd give a friend are different documents, and I've decided to give you both. The witness statement version. From June 2022 to September 2024, I was in a relationship with a Thai national, 29 years of age, employed in retail banking, resident in Bangkok. We did not marry. We did not cohabit for the first 14 months. Financial transfers from me to her over the period totaled approximately 1.5 million baht, given voluntarily, unconditionally, with no expectation of return. The friend version. I was so happy that I frightened myself. That's the truth of it. At 61, I had a woman meet me for lunch on Wednesdays because she wanted to. She had opinions about films. She read actual books, on paper, mostly Thai crime novels and, for reasons I never got to the bottom of, John le Carré. She was funny in a very dry, very specific way that took me about 3 months to fully hear. She corrected my Thai pronunciation with a patience I did not deserve, and she laughed at me, properly laughed, in a manner that after 5 years of being handled gently by people who knew about Susan, was like stepping into cold water. I was not, whatever anybody assumes, deluded about the age gap. I thought about it constantly. I raised it twice. She dealt with it both times in about 4 sentences and moved on, and I concluded, reasonably, I still think reasonably, that a 29-year-old professional woman with her own salary and her own flat was capable of deciding who she spent her Wednesdays with. The 1.5 million baht, over 28 months, was her mother's dental work, a laptop, 4 short holidays, a motorbike, her brother's tuition for 1 year, and a great many meals. About £34,000, given freely. I do not want it back, and it is not part of the fraud, and I include it only for completeness. Now, finding 3. The 4th of November, 2022. She raised the visa, entirely sensibly. I was on a retirement extension, handled by an agent, and it was working, but it was expensive and inelegant. And there were, she said, better routes. And her cousin worked at a documentation service and could look at my situation properly. She needed copies, passport photo page, all existing visa stamps and extension pages, my UK driving license, my residence certificate, my pension statement, my bank statements, Thai and UK, for 12 months, my TM6 departure card, my birth certificate, which I had, because I am the sort of man who has his birth certificate. Every single one of those is a legitimate document to request for a Thai visa or extension application. Every one. Any agent in Bangkok would ask for most of that list, and I have since had 2 immigration lawyers confirm it. There was nothing anomalous about the request whatsoever, and I want to say that clearly, because if you're waiting for the moment where I should have smelled it, there isn't one. That's what made it good. I photocopied everything at the place near the BTS, 41 pages. I put them in a plastic wallet and handed them over on a Friday evening in a restaurant, and we talked about something else. I made no record of what I'd handed over. I did not annotate a single page. I did not write on any of them what they were for, or who they were for, or the date. I did not ask for them back. I did not follow up when the visa route came to nothing 3 weeks later. She said the cousin had reviewed it, and the agent route was actually fine, and I did not, at any point in the following 22 months, think about those 41 pages again. Unmarked, unrestricted, undated, unregistered copies of every primary identity document I possess. In my professional life, I had a procedure for this, an actual written procedure, in the practice manual, that I had drafted, about the handling of client identification documents, which required a log, a stated purpose, a retention period, and a destruction date. I did not apply it. It didn't occur to me to apply it, because applying it would have meant treating my girlfriend as a data risk, and that was on the other side of the wall. I'm not going to describe what was done with those documents. That's a deliberate decision. There are people watching this who would take notes, and the mechanics are not the useful part. What matters to you is the consequence, and the consequence is this. Between January 2023 and August 2024, 5 bank accounts were opened in Thailand bearing my name and my passport number. I have never seen the inside of 3 of those branches. 2 credit facilities were established against my identity. A vehicle hire purchase agreement for 620,000 baht was executed in my name against a car I have never sat in. A personal loan of 700,000 baht was drawn, and a credit card application was made in the United Kingdom against my UK address history, which was approved, and on which £9,400 was drawn down over 5 months. Now the behavioral findings, and this is where I have to be honest about what I saw. Finding 4. She stopped letting me collect post. We moved in together in August 2023, a place off Soa Ari 4. I offered, as one does, to sort the mail from the box downstairs, and she said no, she'd do it, and she said it lightly, and I let it go. And thereafter, for 13 months, I did not once handle an envelope in my own home. Finding 5. Her phone was managed, not hidden, managed. Never face down in a suspicious way, but never left on a table either, never charging in another room. It moved with her. Finding 6. In February 2024, she was extremely upset for 2 days about something at work, and did not explain it, and when I asked, she said a colleague was leaving. I made a note of it in my diary, which I do, because I am that man. The note says, G upset, work, colleague. It sits there in my handwriting, dated, a data point I recorded and did not analyze. Finding 7. Money moved in ways that did not reconcile. She earned, I would estimate, 35,000 baht a month. She had a flat, she ran a car after 2023, she sent money north to her mother, and she never, not once in 28 months, appeared to be short. And I noticed. Of course I noticed. I am an accountant. I performed the arithmetic involuntarily, the way other men notice a badly hung door. And I resolved it by assuming she had savings, or family support, or a second income I hadn't asked about, and by reminding myself that a woman's finances were her own business, and that asking would make me the itemizing the restaurant bill man. Gareth said something in about April 2024. Gareth was a Welshman I did the Tuesday quiz with, ex-oil and gas, been in Thailand 14 years. He asked, apropos of a story about somebody else entirely, whether I'd ever run a check on myself, a credit check. He said he did his every year out of habit from the industry. And I said something along the lines of, I have every account I own reconciled to the penny, which is finding two, delivered by me, out loud, in a bar in Ari, in April 2024, 16 months into the fraud, in the form of a boast. He didn't push it. I've since bought him a very large drink and told him it wasn't his job to. There were 3 further findings from the period, and I'll deal with them quickly, because they are the ones where I came genuinely close. In May 2023, a letter arrived at the Soy Ari flat, addressed to me, from an institution I did not bank with. I saw the envelope on the side. This was before she took over the post, and I picked it up and turned it over and thought, marketing, and put it in the bin unopened. Unopened. I threw away, unopened, a letter from a bank I had no relationship with, addressed to me by name, at my home address, 4 months into a fraud. A letter you did not expect from an institution you do not use is not junk. It is the single most reliable early indicator of identity fraud there is, and it is thrown away by the ton every day, and I threw mine away in about 2 seconds while thinking about lunch. In January 2024, I received a text message in Thai containing a 6-digit code. I could read enough by then to know it was a verification code. I assumed it was misdirected, wrong number, common enough, and deleted it. That happened, I now know from the timeline, 3 times. I deleted all 3. And in June 2024, a mobile provider's shop assistant, doing a SIM registration for me, said something about my identity document being associated with more than one registration, and looked at a screen for a moment, and then shrugged and completed the transaction. I heard that. I remember hearing it. I did not ask a single follow-up question, because I was in a queue, and I wanted my lunch, and because it did not fit into any category I had. 3 separate systems, over 14 months, tried to tell me. The postal system, the SMS network, and a 19-year-old in a phone shop. All 3 were ignored by a man who had made a career out of noticing exactly this class of anomaly in other people's affairs. It came apart because I wanted to buy a flat in Harrogate, not to live in. As an investment, a 1-bedroom near the station, $185,000, let out through an agent, because I had cash sitting doing very little, and 31 years of habit told me that idle capital is a management failure. I needed a mortgage. Expat buy-to-let, so a specialist lender, and a broker in Leeds called Fiona, who had done work for 2 of my old clients. She wanted the usual: identity, income, and a credit report. On the 19th of September 2024, she rang me at about 11 in the morning Bangkok time and said, in the careful voice people use, Kenneth, have you looked at your file recently? I had not looked at my file since 2019. I pulled the statutory reports from all 3 UK credit reference agencies that afternoon. It costs almost nothing, under £2 each, or free on the various portals, and it takes about 20 minutes, and I had not done it in 5 years because I had no borrowings, no cards, no need, and a spreadsheet that reconciled to the penny. The UK file had one entry I did not recognize, a credit card, opened March 2024, balance £9,411, 3 months in arrears. It was linked to my old Panal address, which I had left in 2022, and which was still, because I had never completed the process properly, one of my registered address histories. £9,400. Against $265,000 of capital, that is not a catastrophe. That is a bad afternoon and some paperwork. I sat with that report for about 90 minutes, and I did what I have done for 40 years, which is that I stopped feeling anything at all and started performing a completeness test, if there is one. Are there others? If the UK exposure exists, what is the Thai exposure? Where else does my identity exist as a liability? That was the first time in 64 years I had asked that question about myself, and it took a broker in Leeds to make me ask it. Thailand has a credit bureau, the National Credit Bureau. Any individual can request their own report. You go in person with your passport, or through certain bank branches and app services, and it costs a nominal fee, and it lists the credit accounts held in your name across participating institutions. I went on the 24th of September 2024 with my passport and a Thai lawyer called Anand, because by that stage I had decided to do this properly. The report ran to several pages. I want to describe what reading it was actually like, because it was not what people imagine, and it is, I think, the most honest thing I can tell you about myself. I was interested. That is the word. Not devastated, not sick, not shaking. Interested. My pulse, which I checked because I was wearing the watch, was 78. What I felt, sitting on a chair in an office in Bangkok with my identity itemized in front of me as a set of obligations I had never incurred, was the specific quickening I used to get on day 3 of a forensic engagement when the shape of the thing finally comes up out of the numbers. I actually said, out loud to Anand, who did not know what to do with it, "Oh, that's neat," because it was. As a structure, it was economical and it was patient, and it exploited exactly the 2 weaknesses I have described to you. And some part of me that has never been anything but an auditor sat up and admired it before. The rest of me caught up. The rest of me caught up at about 4 the following morning. 2 credit facilities, a hire purchase agreement on a vehicle, a personal loan, and, listed separately once we pulled at it through the bank's own processes, 5 deposit accounts opened at 4 different institutions between January 2023 and August 2024, all bearing my name, my passport number, and, in 3 cases, an address in Bangkok that has never been mine. Total obligations recorded against my identity, approximately 1.8 million baht, about £41,000 at the rate that month. And then the part that was genuinely serious, which was not the money. 3 of those 5 accounts had been used as pass-through. Funds in, funds out, rapid, from multiple unconnected sources, the pattern that every monitoring system on Earth is built to catch, and which 2 of them had caught in July 2024, which is why 2 of the accounts were already flagged. Accounts in my name, with my passport number attached, had been used to move other people's stolen money. That triggered the thing that actually did the damage. On the 11th of October 2024, on the application of the relevant authorities, my own legitimate Thai accounts, the ones I had opened in that branch off Phahonyothin in May 2022, the ones I reconciled monthly, the ones containing the 800,000 baht for my retirement extension, and a further 4.1 million of working capital I had transferred over from the UK, were frozen pending investigation. £210,000, near enough. Mine, untouched by any fraudster. Frozen because my identity was attached to accounts that had been used as conduits, and because a frozen account is the correct and proportionate response to that, and I would have recommended it myself. 14 months. It was 14 months before that money was released, and I want to be exact about the position. I did not lose it, not a penny of it. I got all of it back in December 2025, with the investigation closed, and my status as a victim rather than a participant formally recorded. But for 14 months, a 64-year-old man with £265,000 could not access 210,000 of it, and had a retirement extension due in February 2025 that requires 800,000 baht in an accessible Thai account, and had £41,000 of disputed obligations attached to his name, and a UK credit file with an adverse entry on it. I lived that year on the pension and on the remaining UK cash. I did not miss a meal. Let's keep this proportionate. I was frightened and inconvenienced and humiliated, not starving. But I want to describe the 14 months properly, because nobody warns you about this part, and it is, in terms of actual daily damage, considerably worse than losing the money would have been. The visa was the immediate problem. My retirement extension was due in February 2025, and it requires 800,000 baht seasoned in a Thai bank account in your own name. I had 800,000 baht in a Thai bank account in my own name. I could not touch it, could not evidence it as available, and could not open a new account anywhere in Thailand, because my passport number was by that stage attached to an active fraud investigation, and every institution I approached, politely, correctly, and with no obligation to explain, declined. I got through it on the income route. My pension converts to a little over 98,000 baht a month, which comfortably exceeds the 65,000 threshold, and I had a British Embassy income letter from 2022 in a folder. The embassy stopped issuing those letters some years ago, and the workaround now involves evidencing the income directly to immigration, which took me 3 visits, a Thai lawyer, an interpreter, and a full morning at Cheng Wathana, in which a very patient officer read 14 months of pension credits into a UK bank statement I had to have certified. It cost me about 31,000 baht in fees and professional time to prove that I had money I already had. Then everything else. My health insurance premium was on direct debit from a frozen account, so it lapsed, and reinstating it at 64 meant new underwriting and 2 exclusions I did not previously have. My condominium fees went unpaid for 2 months until I could route them from the UK. A standing order to a charity I'd supported since 1998 failed, and I only found out when they wrote to my old Harrogate address, which is the same address the fraudulent card had gone to, which I found so absurd that I had to sit down. And the correspondence. God, the correspondence. 4 Thai institutions, 3 UK credit reference agencies, 1 UK card issuer, 1 insurer, 1 embassy, immigration, the investigating authority, and a lawyer. Over 14 months, in 2 languages, with certified translations required for a good deal of it at 800 baht a page. I kept a register. Of course I kept a register. And by the end it ran to 191 items of correspondence. The UK card was the cleanest bit, which surprised me. Under the relevant provisions, a payment service provider generally cannot hold you liable for an unauthorized transaction you did not authorize, and the burden sits with them to demonstrate otherwise. I wrote once, clearly, with a chronology and a crime reference. They pushed back once. I wrote again, cited the specific regulations, and copied the Financial Ombudsman Service on the second letter without actually complaining to them, which is a small trick and a legitimate one. It was written off 11 weeks later, and the adverse entry came off my file in March 2025, after a dispute I filed with all 3 agencies simultaneously. 11 letters. Free, apart from postage. Anyone can do it, and almost nobody does, because the first refusal reads like the end of the matter, and it very rarely is. The Thai obligations were harder, and I settled some of what I might have contested, because I was 64, and the alternative was 3 more years of it. The confrontation, since people always ask. There wasn't one, particularly. I said nothing on the 24th or the 25th. On the 26th of September 2024, I put the National Credit Bureau report on the kitchen table in the flat off Swa RE4, and I sat down opposite her, and I did not say anything at all. Because 40 years of interviewing people about missing money teaches you that the person who speaks first loses. She looked at it for about 15 seconds, and she said, "How much do you know?" Which is, in my experience, the most honest question a person in that position ever asks, and which told me instantly that there was more than what I was holding. She told me over about 2 hours, and I took notes, because that is what I do, and because I had already decided that whatever this conversation was, it was also evidence. She had been defrauded in 2019. That is the finding I did not anticipate, and it is the one that has reorganized my understanding of the entire affair. In 2019, age 24, she had paid an agent 1,800,000 baht for a skilled worker migration package to Australia. A brokered arrangement, employer sponsorship, visa processing, relocation, the lot, presented with documentation, an office in a real building, a website, testimonials, a contract in Thai and English. It was fraudulent. Entirely. There was no employer, no application, no visa. The agent took deposits from the figure she gave me, which I have not verified and which I believe, around 30 people, and closed, and moved, and reopened under another name, which is a well-documented pattern across the region, and which is prosecuted rarely, and successfully more rarely still. The 1.8 million had come from 3 sources. Her mother had sold land, her uncle had lent against a gold shop debt, and the balance had come from an informal lender at a rate that means it does not reduce, it only grows. She was 24 years old, and she owed, in real terms, more than she could earn in 15 years as a bank customer advisor. By 2022, the debt had roughly doubled. That is not exceptional. That is simply what that sort of borrowing does. And here is the thing that I turn over most nights. She met me because I walked into her branch and sat down at her desk. Not because she selected me, because I walked in. And what happened between June 2022 and, on her account, some point in late 2022, was not a plan. She was quite clear about that, and I believe her, for reasons I'll come to. What happened in November 2022 is that I handed her 41 unmarked pages, and she had spent 6 years professionally handling exactly those documents, and she knew with total precision what they were worth. I asked her why she didn't tell me. 2.1 million baht of debt against a man with 265,000 pounds and a documented history of giving her money without being asked. I would have paid it. I want to be entirely honest. I would have paid every baht of it in November 2022 and considered it money well spent. And I said so. And she said, the thing that I have not been able to put down since. She said, then I would have been a woman who cost you 2 million baht. That's it. That's the whole engine of it. She could not be the debt. She could be a girlfriend. And separately there could be a fraud. And those 2 things could live in different rooms and never meet. Compartmentalization. Mine kept me from looking at her. Hers kept her from telling me. We had the identical defect, running in opposite directions. And it took me 19 months and a great deal of professional help to see that the woman who defrauded me and I were, in the specific respect that mattered, the same person. The reason I believe her about the timeline is unglamorous, and it is the sort of thing that convinces an auditor and nobody else. The first fraudulent account was opened on the 9th of January 2023. The documents were handed over on the 4th of November 2022. 66 days. A predator with a plan does not wait 66 days. A predator with a plan does not spend those 66 days at Sunday lunch with a man's colleagues. 66 days is the length of time it takes a person to lose an argument with herself. She was arrested on the 2nd of December 2024. She pleaded guilty in 2025 to offenses relating to the use of another person's identification documents and to the accounts. She is serving a custodial sentence. Her employment was terminated the week of the arrest, and she will not work in a bank again. I gave a statement. I gave it accurately. And I did not embellish it, and I did not soften it. And I want to be clear that I would do so again, because there were other victims. The people whose stolen money went through those accounts were not me, and were not wealthy, and did not have an index-linked pension to fall back on. I also paid for her lawyer. 280,000 baht. I am not going to defend that decision, or explain it beyond saying that both of those things are true, and I have stopped trying to make them agree with each other. There is one more thing I have to put in, and it is the part I have avoided writing for 19 months. I did not tell anybody from my professional life for over a year. Not my old partners. Not the 2 people from the practice I still exchange Christmas cards with. Not the institute. I told Gareth, because he was there, and because he'd asked the question in April. I told my sister in Ripon in about March 2025, and she was extremely kind and slightly baffled, because she has never entirely understood what I did for a living and could not see why it made it worse. It made it worse because of what I was. If a retired dentist is defrauded, that's misfortune. If a forensic accountant is defrauded by a fraud he could have detected from the other side of a desk in an afternoon, that isn't misfortune. That's a verdict. On the whole career, on the 40 years and the 11 appearances in court, and the man in Leeds whose purchase ledger I unpicked in 9 days. I have sat in witness boxes and explained to juries, in a patient and slightly headmasterly voice, how an obvious control weakness went unaddressed for 6 years because nobody with the relevant expertise ever looked in the right direction. I rang Hugh Prentice, my old audit partner, 31 years, in November 2025 and told him the whole thing over about 40 minutes. And at the end, there was a pause and I braced for it. And he said, "Ken, in 2003, I nearly lost the house on an endowment I never read the terms of, and I've never told you either. 31 years, adjacent desks." So that is finding 8, and it isn't about money at all. Client's professional identity operated as a barrier to disclosure, materially delaying remediation and compounding harm. 14 months I sat on this alone, because I could not stand to be a chartered accountant with a story like this, and the shame did more damage to that year than the freeze did. If you are a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a police officer, an accountant, if you are the person other people come to for competence, you are, on the evidence of my own experience, and of every conversation I have had since, more likely to be caught by this, and much less likely to tell anyone. That is a genuinely dangerous combination, and it is worth knowing about yourself before it happens rather than after. Now the recommendations, which is the useful part, and I have numbered them in my head, so bear with me. 1. Perform a completeness test on yourself, annually. This is the entire lesson. Reconciling the accounts you know about is not fraud detection, it is bookkeeping. And I did it perfectly for 31 years, while a parallel set of obligations accumulated in my name. Pull your statutory credit report from all 3 UK agencies, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, because they do not hold identical data, and an entry can sit on one and not the others. It costs a couple of pounds. Do it every year, on a fixed date, like a birthday. If you live in Thailand, request your National Credit Bureau report as well. You are entitled to it. It costs very little, and it is the only way you will ever see a Thai facility opened in your name. 2. Never hand over an unmarked photocopy of an identity document, ever, to anyone, for any reason. Write across the face of every copy, before it leaves your hand, the purpose, the recipient, and the date. Copy provided to for only. Cham. Write it in ink, across the image, so it cannot be cropped out. Keep a log of what you disclosed, to whom, and when. This costs you 30 seconds and a pen, and it is the single highest return control available to a private individual. My professional practice manual required exactly this, and I did not apply it in my own kitchen. 3. If you have moved abroad, close your old address properly. My panel address sat in my credit history as a live association for 2 years after I sold the house, because I never completed the redirection and updating process. And that address is where the UK card went. Register with the electoral roll where you can, update every institution, and consider a protective registration with CFAS in the UK. It costs around £25 for 2 years, and it forces lenders to conduct additional checks on any application in your name. If you find an entry that isn't yours, you can also add a notice of correction to your file, which is free. 4. Handle your own post. I gave up 13 months of sight of my own mail out of politeness. Politeness is not a control. 5. And this is the one I would actually engrave on something. Compartmentalization is not respect. I spent 40 years believing that keeping accountancy out of my relationships was a form of decency, that the alternative was to be the cold man with the receipts. And I was so committed to not being that man that I built a wall, and I put every single one of my professional instincts on one side of it, and I never once let them look at the person I lived with. You do not have to audit the people you love, but you must apply, to your own affairs, the same completeness that you would apply to a stranger's. And the reason is not suspicion. The reason is that fraud is not detected by suspecting a person. It is detected by testing a system. I never suspected her, and I still don't, retrospectively, think I should have. What I should have done is pull a report in January 2023 that had nothing to do with her at all, and would have ended the whole thing in 6 weeks. The control that would have saved me was not about her. It was never about her. That's what I got wrong for 40 years. And it's what I'd like somebody to take away from this. 6. And it follows directly from the letter I binned and the codes I deleted. Treat every unexpected contact from a financial institution as a control test rather than as noise. A letter from a bank you don't use, a verification code you didn't request, a declined application you never made, a statement for an account you don't recognize. None of those are administrative errors. Each one is a system doing its job and finding you unreachable. Open the letter. Ring the number on the institution's official website rather than any number in the message itself. It takes 4 minutes, and it is the cheapest fraud detection available to anybody. I'm 64. I have my capital back, less about £58,000 in disputed obligations I ultimately settled or wrote off. Legal and forensic costs, and the lawyer. My UK file is clean. The adverse entry came off in March 2025 after the dispute process, which took 4 months and 11 letters, and which I rather enjoyed. I'm still in Ari, different flat, 4 doors down, which people find odd and which suits me. I do the completeness test on the 1st of March every year. It takes about 40 minutes and costs under 1,000 baht all in. And the first time I did it, March 2025, sitting at the kitchen table with 3 UK reports and 1 Thai one and a cup of tea, I found nothing at all. Nothing at all. A clean file, fully tested, on a fixed date, with a procedure. I sat there for quite a long time with that. 40 years of writing management letters for other people. 9 findings. 11 pages. 1 client. Finding 9 reads, no evidence was found that the client ever considered himself a system.